This is Somewhere in the Skies with Ryan Sprague.
Welcome everyone to Somewhere in the Skies, and this is an interview we actually had to reschedule for very, very good reasons, but I'm so happy it's finally happening. We're going to be talking all about the latest stuff going on in the UFO world in 2021, and we're going to be talking about his new book, which for once is not about UFOs. So that's going to be exciting. It's about another topic that is near and dear to my heart, and that is pop punk and emo music. So I hope you'll nerd out with us for that part of the conversation. But first, let's talk UFOs with the one, the only Mike Damante. How's it going, brother?
Great, man. Thanks again for being flexible in rescheduling. And like I was telling you off air, it's always good to talk to you, whether we're recording or not. It's always fun. So I always enjoy the opportunity just to chat.
Yeah, exactly, dude. And we got plenty to chat about. But, elephant in the room, let's talk about why we had to reschedule. You just had your first child. How's it going over there, man? How is it being dad Mike Damante?
It's the best. And like we were talking about off the air, everything like stopped. It's like screw UFOs, screw everything else. It's like I was describing it to who was I talking to? One of my friends. And like, when you watch a movie and like in the movie, like things got like slow-mo, or like if you're watching like a superhero movie and there's like or science fiction, there's like a rip in the timeline of Earth. Yeah. Like as soon as a baby comes out, that's what it felt like. It felt like the Earth like changed. Like if you see Justice League, like when the Flash runs and like slows down, that's what it felt like happened. Like it was a crazy feeling. And I think people who are into like kind of like phenomena and paranormal stuff, it's a similar. I think it's a similar feeling, like a game changing type of thing, where it literally feels like there's like a ripple in the world. Like it's crazy. Like people, I guess, who've claimed to stumble upon a different dimension or something. It kind of felt like that would feel.
That leave it to Mike Damante to compare having a child to something paranormal or supernatural. I love it, brother.
Well, I got to tie in because then the listeners will get bored hearing me talk about babies for.
Welcome to baby hour, right? No, congratulations, man. That is amazing. And again, the perfect excuse for a rescheduling. So we're going to have fun. Hopefully get your mind off the baby for just a little bit today. Let's talk all about UFOs first, if you don't mind. I don't think I've ever actually asked you this question. It's kind of the origin question that I ask everyone, but I don't know if we ever discussed this. What really got you into UFOs first and foremost? And is there one like kind of case that you came across that you continue to chase up until today or would consider your favorite?
Well, I think we talked about briefly before, like how I got into it, but in terms of like actual case, I think the main thing that really spearheaded my reinterest in UFOs before I had my sighting and I actually started to investigate right on my own was when I read Communion. I think the Whitley Strieber case it felt like a punch in the gut. It was almost like start paying attention. So as soon as I read that book, I was just super fascinated, more so than I was as a kid. When I was a casual observer to UFOs and as well. So that really reignited kind of my interest. And then you obviously go to the big ones like Roswell, and just because it's the biggest one that happened in North America in terms of like one of the origins of the UFO boom in North America. So Roswell as well. But recently, I've been more and more interested in Rendlesham, which I was always aware of it. I always read about it. I've seen documentaries on it and stuff. But my interest has really kind of grown more so since a story I've done recently on it.
Right, which we're definitely going to touch on in a little bit here, because, you came across something that you ran by me, kind of being the Rendlesham guy to many out there. I can't even pretend to know half of what other researchers know, but I have looked heavily into the case from every witness's perspective. But you found something really interesting, which we'll get to. But before we do that, my man, can you give us kind of a brief overview, I guess, of the trilogy of books of punk rock and UFOs? Now, for a lot of my new listeners and viewers, who may not be too familiar with your work in the UFO field. Tell us a little about this trilogy of books that you came out with.
So it's funny. It never really intended to be a trilogy. I just wanted to write one book and go from there. And I have a journalism background. I worked full-time at the Houston Chronicle on the copy desk doing copy editing. I worked on their website and also did some writing too for like features and sports. So I do have a heavy journalism background. So going into writing a book was kind of different because you're used to writing differently. So the first book I did was more so my own personal theories, as well as tying it to some other things that other people's theories, and really just trying to paint this picture of this is an underdog science for a reason. And that's why the punk rock and UFOs connection kind of comes in, two different, underdog subgenres. So the first book was basically about this is an underdog, it's punk rock and UFOs, cryptozoology meets anarchy. And it's basically looking at this from the view of why this is an underdog science. The second one, True Believers, punk rock and UFOs, True Believers, was more about kind of looking at the people who study this and kind of drawing parallels to these people who are studying it and what they're exactly studying and how it's been viewed in different lenses throughout time. And almost, and George Knapp said this, not me. This is actually a really good compliment when I was on Coast to Coast. He said, at the end of True Believers, I kind of take off my journalist hat and it gets very persuasive. And that was the point of True Believers, to try to invigorate people to want to read more, who, maybe people who really weren't in the subject before. And then the final book, Stranger Than Fiction, is probably the best one out of the three. I think, Ryan, you're a writer, when you continue to learn and grow with each book. And Stranger Than Fiction is really the culmination of all of them. With Stranger Than Fiction, I want to do something that, in my opinion, really hasn't been done that much in terms of UFO books, is to kind of draw parallels and normalize paranormal. And I did that through taking current events, real life cases, as well as stories from the Bible, mythology, religion, and our pop culture throughout time, and just draw all these connections. And that was the main part of the book, because if someone picks up that book and reads something and say, "Oh, Monowak, that's like Stranger Things," or "Hey, Star Wars has this big hairy Chewbacca." It kind of almost looks like Bigfoot, who's been reported in biblical and ancient Sumerian texts. So it was kind of that thing. And that book, I really wanted to reach out to a lot of different people: scientists, journalists, UFO investigators. Who did I get for that book? You, obviously. I had to get Ryan in there. Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal, because those are two big journalists who were really responsible for the 2017 boom. Sean Cahill, Kevin Day, Tom DeLonge. I interviewed all of them because, once again, these are people heavily responsible for kind of where UFOs are at today.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I know you interviewed several people in the comic book industry, in the cinematic universe industry. And I mean, look, man, you had an Instagram post recently about a pyramid, and lo and behold, now that's bleeding into the UFO world yet again. And also the Eternals trailer. Everyone was freaking out about this, man. You got this huge kind of, triangular UFO coming in, and really, I guess I don't know much about the Eternals, to be honest, but to me, it screamed kind of this cargo cult, which you talked about in one of your books as well. So we're seeing these things played out in the mythology of Marvel, DC, and that's what your third book really, really resonated with me, is, again, these stories have been around for centuries, and they get repackaged over and over again, which is so cool.
And a lot of people who always advocate this has been happening forever, right? Through films and stuff. It's a slow disclosure, and a lot of people don't like to hear that. But it's the reality. It's, none of this, nothing's new. This has been happening forever. So, I think it's good that we teach people to start looking for these parallels. Like, I didn't see the Eternals trailer. I saw your post with the poster. That's how far behind. When you said trailer, I was like, oh, there's a trailer for it? I need to watch this. But all I know about the Eternals is it's very similar to DC's version of New Gods. It's basically like older gods before everything. So I'm really looking forward to it. As soon as I saw your post with the poster with the triangle craft, I was like, oh, I had the same reaction you did. But now that you said there's a trailer, I need to watch that. Just to throw behind on life.
Understandably, brother. Yeah, I mean, we're moving into, what is it, phase 4 now of Marvel, which makes me feel so old now that I think back to when Iron Man first came out. I think they just had like the, what was it? Was it the 20th anniversary? I hope that's not true. Maybe 15.
Yeah, it's gotta be
Iron Man. Yeah. Yeah, which made me definitely feel old. But look at how far we've come. It's amazing.
And that kind of goes back to the strength of those characters, right? And all those, you grow with them. And this is something that I kind of like mentioned in the book, is how as we grow and progress, these gods, or whatever you want to call them, like Thor, Poseidon, all these things you hear in mythology, they grow, but they're seen differently. Now Thor exists in our pop culture, where back then he may have existed as a real person, or as folklore, or as represented in a statue or a painting. Now it's common pop culture. Everyone knows who Thor is.
Right. Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah, and then you go to the other side with DC, and you've got Zack Snyder, who a lot of people don't respect as a filmmaker or a storyteller or what have you, but the dude knows how to shoot a film, and also he really touched on that. And I believe it was Batman v Superman, the whole gods aspect, which you covered in the book as well. So
absolutely. I think that's kind of pertinent now with the Justice League Snyder Cut coming out a few months ago, which I was so stoked for, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it. But that's something that a lot of people were dinging him on from the start, was his darker tone. But it's like it's true. If Superman existed, if an alien being came down, the masses would not embrace him with open arms. There'd be debates. There would be, you just, what goes on in our country on a daily basis. And it's like, it's insane to me. So imagine what would happen if an alien being came down from the sky. And that kind of ties into what a lot of people are talking about with the threat aspects of UFOs, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it's a physical threat, but it's just this idea, what is this thing coming down from the sky? We don't know what it is. We don't know its intentions and so forth.
Such a good point. Yeah, we're seeing it reflected in today's mainstream coverage of UFOs. And, these individuals who believe that this is it, this is disclosure, it's happening, the aliens are going to land, or something's going on, which we will discuss. We got so much to catch up on. But let's talk about this article you mentioned, Rendlesham. Now, we know the stories of, the guys who went into the forest and saw a craft, Peniston, John Burroughs, Deputy Base Commander Colonel Charles Halt. These stories have been around for a while now. We've heard them. We've heard every, version of them. But there's another side story to all of this that I didn't know about, and that actually someone came to you with. So can you tell us a little about this development in the Rendlesham case, and how this article came to be? How did this happen?
Yeah, so anytime someone comes to us with something, no matter who they are, we always take it with a grain of salt because of our journalistic standards, just the fact that everything we present is very extraordinary to begin with. So you really have, so this is like, you're the first person I told about. So let me run it by Ryan. He has you're more experienced in UFOs, and you really have a good meter. You filter, what you choose to put on your show, what you choose to cover is very distinct. So I think you have a good filter of what to run and what not to run. So you're one of the first people I reached out to. I reached out to you, Alejandro Rojas, as well, saying, "Hey, have you ever heard anything about this?" Just because I was, you're generally skeptical when you hear these things, especially when someone comes to you. And I'm like, I'm not big. I'm not CNN. I'm not a big outlet. But in this case, it's weird. You'd think that, our little UFO club is small, but it's obviously really big. And I swear, the more you talk to people, the more someone knows someone who's seen something or has done something or worked somewhere. So it was that sense where it was like a friend mentioned something in passing about a relative. Like, oh, you should totally talk to this person. I was like, okay. And really not, we're just really kind of vague about it. Oh, yeah, he's seen a lot in his day working for the military. And, I'm just thinking, okay, cool. It's going to be, maybe some cool sightings or but it turned into being something much more. And maybe that's, I don't know, I live in Houston, so it's the fourth largest city. So maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. So I got in contact with this person, and I don't want to reveal too much because it is a friend of a friend. But I made sure I let him know, hey, look, I need to, do a background, all these things cover my butt, just because the story sounds like so extraordinary. And he was totally cool, presented his military records and everything. They all checked out. And everything he said in terms of when he served and where he served, all lined up. But yeah, he had a lot to say, about UFOs and just a lot of stuff in general. Just, really, I felt like I was talking to one of us, someone who's really open-minded towards, this as well as society and how stuff works, So long story short, this person was a communications official and was stationed in Germany at the time. And part of this communications, where you'd be getting stuff across a wire. It was almost kind of like email, right? Or a different form of communication, or not like a telegraph, but something more, a little more technologically advanced. So back then, so he would see things all the time that would come across, this wire. Basically, it's like a news wire, but it was only for, it was clearance that was beyond top secret. So it was like very few people were seeing this stuff. And I mean, to him, that was the weirdest thing he saw in all his time there was the Rendlesham Incident, and the fact that, and this is the big pull of the story, was that somebody didn't return. And when I heard that immediately like something went off in my head, and I'm like, wait, I don't remember, because I said to myself, I know enough about this case. Like I know the 5 W's of it. I know what Rendlesham's about, but I never heard anything about that. And that automatically struck me as something that we need to talk more about. And he says he doesn't know if the person eventually came back, but for the communication that he got and has heard of, the person never responded. And the way and I kept saying abduction. And he was like, well, I don't think it was abduction. More rather, it was something that was purposeful. Rather like a trade or someone willingly got on one of the ships. That's the conclusion he was drawing from what he read. But like he's seen a lot, and like he said, he's read. It's interesting because he's read all the Tom Clancy books, and all the Tom Clancy books are very military accurate. So it's just another kind of example of kind of this, fiction, nonfiction stuff blurring. But yeah, so the big thing was kind of how there's people that have access to some of these events and some of these military codes, right? And they were able to write about it. So it was interesting to him that, Tom Clancy was able to kind of get all this military stuff. But yeah, for him, this was the weirdest thing he saw, the fact that someone, didn't come back. And we started talking more and just, he knows about the case, but he's not necessarily like a UFO buff. Like he knows everything that's going on, nowadays because it's on the news. Other than that, he wouldn't go looking for it. He always kind of believed in UFOs and there's probably something out there, but, he didn't actively pursue it. So when he read this, when this came across his wire, the fact that somebody maybe didn't come back, it just struck him as odd. And the really interesting thing too is that he's more surprised more people who've seen it haven't talked about it. Just because I don't know if it was I don't know if it was a clearance thing or people were afraid, but it was just he was shocked because obviously a lot of people would need to know clearance saw this come across. So that was the big takeaway from that apparently somebody, for some reason, we don't know, I call it an abduction, but we don't know what it was. But for some reason, this person didn't return. So yeah, that was huge. And just talking to him, he's really open-minded about just paying attention to what's going on in the world as well and other stuff. And he thinks the UFO phenomena, and this is something we've talked about too, is he thinks this is going to be a gradual thing, just like everything else. And he's a history buff, so he made a great point. Anything that happens in history happens over time. Any change, whether it's like a civil rights movement or a political movement, it happens over time. And he thinks what's happening in this country now is representative of what's happened in the past. Things have gradually changed over time. You're not going to get disclosure overnight. He didn't say the word disclosure, but basically, the UFO phenomenon, it's not going to happen overnight. And that's what people have been telling us for years. And we've kind of refused to believe it. And, when people say these things take time and, a lot of UFO people scoff at it and say, oh, that's just BS. That's, you guys are stalling or whatever. But we're seeing it happen now. And it's crazy. In 2017, what all the To the Stars people were saying, it's happening now. All this stuff really does take time. And it's just, it's just crazy to kind of see that come to fruition.
Yeah, it is a process. I am firmly with the person you interviewed and with you, man. I truly believe that we're getting there, maybe slowly but surely. I also don't believe, that this pending UAP report is going to be grand disclosure of any kind, which we will discuss. But that's so fascinating. Again, just when you think you know everything about Rendlesham, something else comes along, which is very important. All of the key witnesses are mostly still alive. So I agree with someone like David Clark, who is a UFO skeptic who's covered Rendlesham a lot, that we're very fortunate to still have a lot of the people involved with this, and that it might become the most important case even past Roswell. So I think that's super fascinating that you've added another layer to the mystery. You have to wonder too, someone like John Burroughs, who said he experienced some sort of missing time during this event. So are we dealing with some sort of abduction scenario? I don't want to go that far, but also the other intriguing part you mentioned is this person was never seen nor heard from again, at least according to the individual you interviewed. We know for a fact that after these events, everyone involved, all the personnel, were like shipped off to Germany, shipped off to Japan, like anything to get everyone separated so that they didn't come together, get their story straight, and go public with it. So you truly have to wonder what happened to that individual. We may possibly never know, but that's super fascinating, man. What do you take away from it? Do you think we're dealing with aliens abducting people in Rendlesham, or what do you think overall of the case?
I don't know. Well, what's really fascinating to me is, I did some more research on it because it's been a while since I've read it. And I was watching the Steve Greenwald video, what is it called? The New York Post thing he does from the basement.
Oh, Stephen Greenstreet. Yep.
Green Street. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Stephen Greenstreet. Yeah. It was with him and Nick Pope. And I totally forgot that the whole Jim Pennison thing with the coordinates.
Yeah.
And the coordinates landing towards like the Irish folklore version of Atlantis and certain, the Nazca lines and pyramids. Like, that was mind blowing to me. What's interesting, the person I interviewed for the book, not for the book, for the story, I didn't really ask him what he knew much about the case, but he believed the same thing Pennison does, where he thinks that it's coming from time. It's a time traveling element. That's what he thinks. That's personally his opinion. And he said multiple times, don't quote me on this as fact. This is just my opinion based on, my personal beliefs and what I read. He says, he thinks it's something coming from a different time. So I thought it was really fascinating that he said that, and that kind of goes with what Jim Pennison believes as well. So there's a lot of really interesting things what he believed based upon what he read that kind of go with the key witnesses as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and oh, no, please.
Oh, no, I was going to say, like, you mentioned me uncovering like a new part of it. I thought it was going to be huge. Like, I was going to blow up. And it's just so funny. I was like,
dude, welcome to ufology. Like, just when you think, and it's frustrating because, again, I know you took the time to vet this individual. Like, we were talking, through text and everything, like, all right, make sure you have all your ducks in a row, which I don't have to tell you. You're the one who went to journalism school. I am a quote unquote journalist, according to some of the people out there who don't think too highly of my work, but that's a story for another time. You actually went to school for journalism. You know what you're doing. So I know you would not have put this out if you didn't firmly believe there was something to it. And again, your source is not saying this person was sucked up into a UFO, but we have that sort of lore in UFO history that there have been exchange programs, something like, here, let us study your craft and you could take one of ours, or let us study your entity and you could take one of ours. So it's crazy, man.
Yeah, it's crazy because, like, it really is 5 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Remember, is that what it is? Because even before this, like maybe a month or two before, another friend of mine reached out to me on Facebook saying, hey, I know you're into UFOs. I read your stuff sometimes. I got something to tell you. You can't tell anyone. I'm like, oh, come on. Like, don't do this. And he's basically telling me that, this person knows someone close to them who's working on the report right now. And I'm like, oh my God, can I please? He's like, nope, I can't even tell you this person's name. I just want to tell you that it's happening, and and even said, the person even said to me that, this person, he tries to discuss it with this person. And it's always kind of like side eyes, like the response, kind of like a wink and nod type of thing, just because so much of the stuff is so classified. But I ended up doing some research and I found out who the person is, but I can't say anything. I can't reach out to them because I get this other person in trouble. So it's crazy that they're like, somebody who's working on this report right now, I'm separated by one other person.
Literally one person.
If I could, but it's like, it's such a, it's the thing where you don't overstep your boundaries in this case. If I was working for like CNN or Washington Post, I think it'd be a different story. I may be able to do it that much, but this is more of a, I don't want to break someone's trust. You could eventually be a source in the future.
Yep, that's very important in journalism. As frustrating as it is, we got some flack over at the debrief when we came out with those first, UFO report leaks that we got of people being like, why can't you name them? Why can't you name them? Because that's how you keep sources.
Yeah.
So just be happy we're getting anything. But on the flip side, I do understand a reader's perspective of, well, then we're just taking your word for it. But that's what journalism is. And it's been that way for a very, very long time. So it's up to you to either take it for what it is or don't. And that's the freedom we have of being, on the outside of the story and reading it. But let's talk about...
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to add to that. A lot of people don't realize that the sources are ran by editors. So... Right. And I'm telling people, I write for the debrief too as well. And MJ does not run anything that would damage the credibility of that brand.
Nope.
Bottom line. So, everything goes through them. They're the editors, just like it would, a mainstream newspaper. When I worked, even when I want to do something, when I was at the Chronicle, I wanted to just write a story. You have to get approved by editors. Same thing. And if the editors approve the sources, then there you go. That's all you need to know in terms of whether it passes. If it passes the sniff test of the editors, then there's really not much explanation needed to the public saying, why can't you name the sources? Especially when it's something sensitive like this. People, because sometimes naming sources could be damaging to that person's personal life, reputation, and work. Especially, like I said, when we're dealing with people who are in these higher levels of government. And something we're going to talk about later, I don't know if this is coming up, but it'd be a great segue. Elizondo is a great example of that, of somebody coming out and then people trying to damage his reputation.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, let's do it. Let's dive into that. A recent article at Politico. I'm just going to read a little bit here, Mike, from the article to give people some context. So this comes directly from Brian Bender at Politico. Quote, former Pentagon official Elizondo, who went public about reports on UFOs, has filed a complaint with the agency's Inspector General, claiming a coordinated campaign to discredit him for speaking out, including accusing a top official of threatening to tell people he was crazy, which, like you said, that's what we deal with sources in this field. They don't want their names out there for obvious reasons, stigma, ridicule, which is shedding. But so let's see what else. Elizondo filed a 64-page complaint to the independent watchdog, the IGs, on May 3rd, and has met several times with investigators, according to his legal team. Wow. What else do we have? Elizondo told the IG he has evidence in the form of emails, documents, and the public record, which, quote, suggests a coordinated effort to obfuscate the truth from the American people. Like, these are not light words, man. This is not just like speculative. He's claiming some pretty serious stuff. Right before this report is due on June 25th. So what do you make of this whole Politico thing? This is crazy.
Yeah, when I came across, so we were talking earlier off air, and as soon as I saw it come across my feed, I'm like, oh, Brian Bender wrote it. I'm going to read it. It's because there's so many UFO stories this week that are mostly just kind of rehashes of what we already know. And like right away, nothing in that was really a surprise to me in terms of, because Elizondo has been saying this from the start. As soon as he came out, he said that there are going to be some who are going to attack my credibility. He said he may have a target on his back. He said it wasn't a popular when he left, and his plan, one of the stuff he was saying when he first left, it wasn't going to be popular. People told him that. He's been saying this the whole time. So then when people were coming back, when the Pentagon was being wishy-washy with, what his responsibilities are, what his role was, he said that was going to happen. So to me, it was no surprise that, here's where we're at now. And there's people, I think a lot of people did their due diligence in terms of seeing if he was the right person. But if Leslie Kean, Helene Cooper, and Ralph Blumenthal did it, then yeah, you should believe them. Just because of the standards and practices of the New York Times. If they can deem him credible enough to run that first story, then that should be enough for everyone. And I know some people in the field made it a really a goal of theirs to really try to discredit him. And I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus, but I think we all know who we're talking about. And I'm not trying to talk mess or anything, but they really try to not purposely drag his name under the mud, but try to find evidence that would potentially say this guy's not who he says he was. And that's what Elizondo said was going to happen, and then here we are. So I think it's all kind of full circle.
Yeah, you're so right. I didn't even think about that. He did say from the very start, like, get ready. They're going to try to say I didn't work at the DOD and this and that, which they're still dealing with. I mean, we've had quotes from the Pentagon saying, nope, he didn't. He wasn't the head of the program. Nope, he did not work for the Department of Defense. So, like, it's all about wording, man. And we know with intelligence people and stuff like that, it's all between the lines. So this is an interesting story. Again, it seems like Elizondo's not gonna, put his tail between his legs and just move on. He's ready to confront the Pentagon, especially when this report is due. So he is the one saying we got to keep putting pressure on him, or we're gonna be back to the end of Project Blue Book. You're going to not get anything. They're going to say it's not a national security threat, and they're going to move on. Or on the flip side, they're going to use it to their advantage and say, we got to pump, $8 billion more dollars into the Navy or this or that. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of any of this, dude, to be honest. Like, it's too much. Like, we had nothing for so long. Before 2017, we were talking about the same damn cases over and over again. And now it's almost like, it's just like everything else in the world. We don't even have time to process things before we have to move on to the next story. So I'm dizzy. I feel like every morning I wake up, I'm going to be like, okay, what's going to happen today? Which is what we kind of felt the last 4 years with Twitter, I think, as well. So just when we thought we were done with waking up, to something crazy on Twitter, now we have it in the UFO Twitter world where we wake up and it seems like some big bombshell is out there.
And I was thinking about this. Conspiracy theorists are having a field day with this right now. You think about everything that's happening right now in this country, like in the world, right? Imagine if there's something to, and I'm not trying to play into any of that, but just imagine the argument that if there's something to bring humanity together, because there's so much division in this country and throughout, all throughout the world right now. So if there was an alien threat, right, would that bring us together? Even let's look on the flip side. What if it united us in a positive way? What if we said, this is real. We can better the world for everyone with this technology, and that brings us together. What about on the flip side of that? But like, I saw something the other day that really had me worried. It's like, because I said conspiracy theories are probably going crazy with this, and I'm a big fan of. I'm a big fan. I'm so a big. Sort of looking for. I appreciate reading everything that the Bledsoes put out, that Chris and Ryan do, because I think it's really fascinating. And Ryan Bledsoe, his Twitter, I think, is a gem, because it's just full of like breadcrumbs, whether you believe it or not. And he said something the other day about, there's going to be people in power who want to bring, end times again, and there also may be a false narrative pushed with UFOs. And like that clicked in my head. I was like, oh my God, if I'm a conspiracy nut, I'm thinking. People in power, and I'm not trying to get political, but it's true right now. There's a party in this country right now who's doing everything they can to make things bad, make things worse. So that is true. Check that box, right? And now there's a looming UFO report that could be manipulated in some sense to either cause division or cause unity. So like that kind of had a conspiracy, nut in my brain kind of put those connections together. But I know there are people who are taking this, way further than that. But I just think it was interesting to think about, like, what if there's a point there,
Yeah.
Well, this timing of everything is like crazy.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And again, not getting too political. We've had this conspiracy theory thing going on for the past 4 years. So it's hard. Nobody knows what to believe anymore on either end of the political spectrum. And again, it seems that the answers seem to always lie somewhere in the middle. But you're right. There are individuals out there. And now we have that divide in the UFO field. You've got Elizondo and these pilots saying, it's a potential threat. Like, we got to be careful. And then you've got someone like Dr. Stephen Greer on the other end of the spectrum saying Elizondo's a disinformation agent. This is all planned. They're planning a coordinated false flag alien invasion, and don't listen to them. Aliens are peaceful. They're peaceful. I can bring them in with flashlights if you don't believe me. So, dude, I get it, man. Where it's like we've gone from red and blue in the overall world to now Greer or Elizondo in the UFO world. It mirrors it so badly, and oh man, I don't know what to make of it all.
It's exciting times. It's also scary times. It really is. It's because it's like you hear all these impending, not conspiracy theories, but all these, revelations, all these things that you hear, and you're like, man, that kind of sounds like what's happening right now, but that can't possibly happen, right? But you're like, well, what if? And that's part of, that's irrational too, as well, to think that what if scenario. But I just think the UFO stuff happening right now, and the fact that it's happening right now, and it's like it's making headlines, and that says something. With everything going on in the world, in the country right now, this is making big news. I think speaks volumes in terms of where we're at right now. And I remember, I think last time I was on about a year ago, we talked about how when the Pentagon officially said, hey, these are real, these videos you've been watching for the past 3 years, they're real for sure. They dropped that right in the middle of the pandemic, thinking it was going to be buried. And it didn't. It was like a top news story that day. So I think it's same thing's happening now. I mean, this isn't going away from any news coverage, regardless of what's going on. If anything, I feel like it may even be burying some of the bigger stories,
That's a good point. Let's talk agenda for a moment here. You have Jeremy Corbell, you have George Knapp, you have the Debrief, who are all sort of being given these, I don't want to say breadcrumbs. I think that's condescending in a way, but they're given these leaked reports. Or these videos, someone like Corbell and Knapp dropping two pretty big, exciting UFO videos for us to debate for the end of time yet again, or something like the Debrief, getting some of the reports of this possible triangular UFO emerging from the ocean and going up into the sky and getting photos and videos of it. It's crazy, man. So what do you make of all of this stuff coming to light before we even get this pending UAP report? Why are these things being given to who they are? I think is a big question in people's minds. And why? Why now? Why are they doing this when the report's coming soon?
It's funny. I'm going to quote Chris Wolford, the tidal wave. Yeah, he said from the beginning there's going to be a tidal wave of like UFO stuff, and I always thought that was so funny, but like in a good way. He's like spot on, man. It was going to be a tsunami. I think this is just part of it, but it's like, it is interesting, who's getting it. The Debrief makes sense just because of the brand, it's defense, it's tech. Like I said, it's a very slick brand that stays on brand. They'll deviate and do like kind of like more funnier, lighthearted stuff. A lot of stuff I do for them is just kind of more of the fun or crazy science stuff, just because it's interesting to me. I like writing about that stuff because it's different than, what I usually write about, but that makes sense. George Knapp makes sense. Jeremy Corbell as a filmmaker makes sense to a degree. I think it's kind of weird that he would get it. I guess it makes sense because he's associated with Knapp, and I'm not trying to, downplay any of Jeremy's accomplishments. I just think it's kind of weird that it's going to a non-mainstream filmmaker, if that makes sense. And I think part of that may be his association with someone who's very credible in George Knapp. But it's interesting that it's going there and not CNN or Washington Post or something. It's not, like I said, it's not a knock towards any of them as well. So that's just interesting to me. And what I'm thinking is, these smaller sites and like the Debrief and Jeremy. Not that Extraordinary Beliefs is a small site, but as opposed to MSNBC.com or whatever,
right?
That they're getting these videos, right? But think about it: if and the Debrief is getting stuff, if we're getting these videos that are pretty revealing, but nothing mind-blowing. Imagine what they have that hasn't been given out yet, and where that goes. If I guarantee you, they probably have not. Let me phrase that. I don't guarantee you, but if they have something that's on par with the Tic Tac, I'm pretty sure you want CNN or New York Times to get that as well. So I'm thinking, my belief is they have heavier stuff that will come out eventually. I think too. But I think right now, I think they're really trying to get as much of this stuff out. Whoever's doing it, whoever's allowing this, to be seen. Because like I said, if I'm reading a story about tech and defense and I see the debrief.org and I've never been there before, I look at it and say, oh, this looks cool. This looks credible. Mm-hmm. If I don't know who George Knapp is and I Google him, say, oh, okay, he's a real journalist. If I Google Jeremy Corbell, I say, oh, okay, he's written, he's made films about this. So it would make sense to kind of land there. But I think it has to be strategic. I think there's probably bigger stuff that I think at some point would have to land on a larger outlet. And that's not disrespect to any of the previous people or outlets that we talked about. One that we both write for. It's not disrespect to them at all, but you would think, like if there's another or something similar as like the Tic Tac video, you think that would land to, Washington Post, New York Times or something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to agree with you, Mike. I think possibly what we're being given could be a little less, I guess, exciting to the not just the mainstream overall, but what the Pentagon is willing to release. And it's funny too, because these videos that Jeremy put out, they were authenticated by the Pentagon spokespeople within hours of Jeremy putting them out. Whereas like the videos originally from the DoD, it took almost 2 years for them to acknowledge that, yes, these are official Navy videos. They remain unidentified. What we don't know about what Jeremy has released is if these objects still remain unidentified. We know these videos were used in the briefings given to, people within the intelligence agencies or the military. These were the videos they showed them to be like, what do you think it is? We got to figure this out. Maybe they did. And they're like, okay, we can probably let these, give it to the public. That'll satisfy them for now, at least. Whereas something like you said, the Tic Tac is like, they can't argue that remains unidentified, at least that we know of that's not classified. So I do wonder, too, if, these are the things they're like, it's fine. Let's just let them put it out there for now. So then they'll have something to be like, okay, we got a little of something before the pending UAP report when we don't give them anything. If that's the case. I hope that's not the case.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. If that report isn't anything, well, we at least have these videos. And speaking of which, just a few minutes ago on Twitter, I was reading before we recorded, Sean Cahill, who's, for those at home, was one of the witnesses of the Nimitz Tic Tac incident. He quote tweeted Jeremy's latest video and basically saying how everything checks out in terms of like the military protocol, the speech on it, the way the radar looks. I thought that was a really good endorsement of that video, because some people may look at it and say, "Oh, I can't see anything. This is just a radar." Like, what is, what I mean? Some people may say that, but you hear Sean Cahill saying, "No, this is their reaction is normal to what they saw." So I think that's pretty cool.
It is. And again, for those watching or listening, this will go up Monday. Today's Thursday, May 27th, as we're recording this. So who knows what's going to happen between then and when this releases, Mike. But that you're speaking about a video that Jeremy dropped today, May 27th, of the radar to I believe it was the Omaha incident, where the objects seem to submerge into the ocean.
Well, if you can write a general lat long where we're at. And then the number of contacts you got, get the course and speed meters off them. You know what I mean? And roll to position to us. Make bearings. Might be helpful too. Eyes up. Eyes down.
System 2, maintain track as best you can.
Track 781 just sped up to 46 knots, 50 knots, closing in. Oh, it's actually 38 knots. Holy shit, going fast.
That one's pretty much perfectly 000 relative, right?
Yeah.
263 at 3 miles, 55 knots speed.
We're seeing all of the different objects that were tracked on radar. It wasn't just this one object that went into the water and they actually went to investigate, tried to find it, and they couldn't. It's, again, being a part of these swarms. We keep hearing with the Tic Tac event or the Go Fast. Like, we're seeing one object in these videos, but everyone there is saying, dude, like it was raining UFOs that day, man. Like, these things were everywhere. So what the hell is that if it's not Chinese or Russian, as a lot of these people are saying? That's very troubling, in my opinion. So I'm glad Jeremy put that out. It just gives us more context, which is what we need. And it's more data, which is what we desperately need in this field, especially when it comes to videos like this. So, yeah, I think it's pretty interesting, man. Well, let me ask you this. To the stars. Now, you've met Delonge. You have interviewed him. You followed the course of To the Stars Academy from the beginning up until, I don't want to say its end, because I don't think it's completely done with. But any sort of new revelations or observations that you've had recently about where To the Stars Academy lies today?
Well, it's interesting because, when Lou and Chris Mellon left, obviously it's like when you lose your two biggest heavy hitters in terms of credibility, you're going to have to pivot somehow. And for them to kind of go, okay, we're going to do a little bit more of the entertainment aspect. I think that was expected, especially when you lose those two people. But it's almost, this is kind of like what I think was intended from the start, not for them to leave, but for Tom to eventually do more of the entertainment stuff, which he said, I want to do books and movies about that incorporate real elements of the phenomena and put it, in fictional works. And that's one of the quotes he gave me from my book, Stranger Than Fiction, because this is something that's been going on for 70 years now. So what they're doing is really no different. So I think now he's actually getting more opportunity to do that because as the company pivots, and we don't know if they're fully pivoting. We don't know what's happening with these apps they were developing. I'm trying to figure that out. I'm trying to find that out right now. We don't know what's happening with some of these other, things that they were doing. So we don't know at this point, but we do know, To the Stars as a brand is, concentrating more on the entertainment element. And I think this is something that was kind of planned from the start, the Tom to eventually, concentrate more on the entertainment side of things, which he was talking about doing even before To the Stars Academy even started. So lately, there's been quite a few nice little breadcrumbs that he's kind of left so for people who are unaware, he has two bands, Blink-182, which he's not currently in at the moment, but Angels and Airwaves is his other band. And Angels and Airwaves for years have kind of tied in themes of consciousness and dreams and the universe and love and all these types of new agey, paranormal-ish kind of stuff in the music. These themes and kind of ran through Angels and Airwaves' music. So they recently started like a little fan club thing, and I'm a nerdy fanboy, so I was like, yeah, I'll join it. So it's always interesting to see what fans say. But anyway, Tom was doing an interview with Allison Hagendorf for Spotify, and he mentioned The Monsters of California, which is a movie he did during the pandemic, and it does sound similar to kind of Strange Times, which is a kind of young adult. Super Bad meets paranormal. This sounds like an adult version of that. Well, anyway, long story short, he mentioned he wants it out by Halloween. And one thing I took from that interview is he said the third act of the movie has a lot of stuff that UFO people will dig. And it's all from, current real events. So that was really interesting that the third arc of this film is going to be heavily influenced by real stuff. Because in the Secret Machines books, there's a lot of stuff that I was shocked that he put in there that's apparently based on true stuff as well. So that was interesting to me. And then recently, his band Angels and Airwaves released a video for a song called Euphoria. And
right.
In the video, somebody did this, someone in the fan club thing, I call it they slowed down a scene. And in the video, basically, there's this girl and a guy, they're meeting up, and it really doesn't tie what the song's about. The song is actually about kind of toxic masculinity and how it's such an awful thing. But in the video is basically about this girl tracking down this guy, capturing and stealing his badge. And when you freeze frame it, the badge is a clearance for Area 51.
Yes.
And
I caught that. I was going to text you the photo. I totally forgot. I'm so happy you're bringing this up, man.
And then the name on it is Pete Anderson. Now, for many people say, well, what's the relevance for that? So Tom has a whole other franchise called Poet Anderson.
Right.
Which is all about like dreams and sleep studies, and it's actually really cool. So it's interesting that Pete Anderson, so is he somehow tying all his fictional components together? And I was thinking, because they shot 3 music videos back to back. So my theory is all these videos somehow tie in to Monsters of California, which is supposed to come out in the fall. That's my personal theory. But I think that it's interesting that, he's putting these little, say it again, these little breadcrumbs for the stuff he's doing, all the stuff he's doing To the Stars and the Angels and Airwaves videos and stuff too. So that's really interesting that he's kind of tying in, the ideas of consciousness and dreams that he did in Poet Anderson to kind of Area 51. And also there's another thing too, is there's something that they're hinting at called Project Dreamland. Now we're not sure, is that the name of the album? Is that something they're associated with the album? But they did send out to the record label sent out 50 cassette players with coordinates, and the fans who got it would have to figure it out. And the coordinates were 3 dates and locations. And basically now we know that these are shows, concerts or whatever. But the
damn. I was hoping, dude. I was hoping it was the coordinates to Element 115 in the desert.
But it's interesting because, Project Dreamland, the book Dreamland, that was put out by him, by Tom, and kind of by a not to the stars, but what is it?
Imprint.
Imprint. There you go. The book's called Dreamland Area 51. So there's Project Dreamland, and now there's the Area 51 badge showing up in the videos. I think it's really clever. And whether people, care about not about, his non-UFO stuff, this kind of ties in with it, in my opinion. So it's just fascinating to see what's going to come in this film and, what other Easter eggs he's leaving us. But once again, I mean, this is, I like to defend him because I think he was right all along. Everything he said in 2017 eventually happened, and everything he said he wanted to do with the fictional elements of it, he's doing. And even if Lou and Chris left, and let's say To the Stars Academy folds as like a science division and becomes an entertainment, I mean, mission accomplished, right? I mean,
seriously,
you could argue that Lou and Chris Mellon are maybe better positioned now to go forward with whatever they're going to do next because of the momentum they got with those stories in the New York Times and that little push from To the Stars Academy. So, that's what I think. So I think everything, everyone who kind of laughed at him, everything he said is kind of coming true slowly and shortly.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. And I'm hopeful for the future, no matter what. I would like to know a little more about, Krata and this agreement they had with the arm, metamaterials, but maybe we'll get there. What's up, guys? Ryan Sprague here, and I'm just dropping in to remind you about our Patreon campaign. Somewhere in the Skies is always free to consume, but it's not free to create. So if you want to help the show on a monthly basis, we have tons of rewards for you in return, including shoutouts on the show and website, bonus content and episodes, and free merch. Want to be my guest or pick a topic for the show? You can do that too. So if you'd like to learn more and to help support the show, visit patreon.com/somewhereskies. Thank you, and keep looking up. All right, Mike, I want to move to the second part of our conversation today. We did mention Tom DeLonge, and you can't think about Tom DeLonge without thinking of Blink-182, one of the greatest, most successful pop punk bands of all time. I think I've seen them 4 times live in my pop punk history. But let's go there, brother. Hey, Suburbia, a guide to the emo pop punk rise, your new coffee table book that you came out with. You've moved beyond UFOs and gone back to one of your other passions, my man. So tell us a little about the book. How did it come about? What made you want to write it? And give us a little understanding of what we're dealing with here.
So it's been a passion project of mine, I guess, on and off for the past 5 years. Just years of, like I said, when I started working at my college newspaper, it was myself. I'd write probably 90% of the life and art section, just me. At some point, I was writing 10 articles a week. I had my own beat, which was oddly enough, which was technology. But I was also writing features. So I would do do CD reviews, interview bands or whatever. So at that time, I was also, besides going to school during the day and working for the school paper, I'll go at night and work at the Chronicle. I had my foot in the door doing like proofreading and just very minimal stuff. So eventually, once I graduated and I was still working at the Chronicle, doing more real heavy lifting, more editing, I brought my portfolio to Future saying, hey, I really like, interviewing, these types of bands doing this type of music, because they had 2 staff writers who really didn't cover pop punk or punk rock or emo at all. And they said, sure. So every once in a while when something would come up, I would, do it for the paper or for the website. I started covering Warped Tour for them. And that just kind of spiraled into, hey, I always felt like I was unofficially the pop punk beat writer, unofficially, because it was never like an official thing. But I was like, hey, can I cover the show, please? I can take pictures. You don't need to send out a photographer. You don't need to pay me since I already work here. And they're like, sure. So for me, I was getting to cover these shows and, play music journalist. And so all those years, I was able to meet and interview so many of my favorite bands and heroes, Alkaline Trio, Bad Religion, Newfound Glory, Blink, Taking Back Sunday, kind of, Warped Tour, all those types of bands and that whole scene. So, I was thinking, I have so much rich history and quotes from this time period in this music that was always really, to me, a huge integral part of my development as a young adult. I grew up as a 90s kid. I graduated high school in 2000. So it's like transitioning from, high school to, real life. And, that music plays such a huge part for me from when I first discovered it in 1997 till now. So I wanted to write something that was kind of like a love letter to that scene. And the book really took on different iterations before finally coming up with this idea of doing a coffee table book, something that's quick, referenceable, a light read, informative, also would have pictures, photos, essential albums, viewing guides, charts, lists, etc. And it's testimonials from people in the bands, people from behind the scenes, and then also me kind of telling the story. And so much of the book was already written because I had all these great quotes that I've done through the years from all these bands. So it's basically just piecing it together, finding a way to make it work, and then finding a home for it. So that's how it really came to be. And it became more of a reality, I think, the past year because I would pitch it and it kept getting knocked down. A bunch of people said, no, we don't want to do it. Or the publisher that did it, they put out some of my other books. And when I pitched it as a coffee table, they grew as a company and they do children's books. And they just recently released a guide. It was basically like a bird watching guide, something like that. So it's so they're familiar with doing these types of books now. So they really jumped on it, especially right now. I mean, this music is kind of having a comeback. My Chemical Romance, when they announced obviously it was postponed due to COVID, but it sold out in like an hour all around the world, which is crazy. All these cities still have emo nights, so it's like, and now you have all these mainstream pop stars and rap stars making pop punk. So it's like, this is a really good time to release it. I told him, like, this is a really good time to do so. And right now, the book's on pre-order. Comes out June 10th officially. But right now, it's still the #1 new release in music encyclopedias on Amazon, which is blowing my mind.
Congrats, man. That's
I'm
so
doing
cool.
With you, Ryan, because you also had a #1 Amazon for the stuff like the skies redo. So
yeah, absolutely, brother. It feels good to be on the top. It's all downhill from there.
Hey, Newfound Glory.
Get that reference? Thank you. Oh, good.
I know you're a big Newfound Glory fan. So
I am, man. I remember I went to see Newfound Glory, but they actually were opening for Blink. So obviously everyone was there to see Blink 182. But me and my buddies, Bruce, Dan, Dave, and me, the four whitest names you could ever possibly think of in suburban Syracuse, New York. We went to see Blink in Newfound Glory, and we were like in the front row, and we were the only ones singing every lyric to NFG. And they kept looking at us. They're like, whoa, this is pretty cool. So they kept like coming up and literally like singing right in front of us, which was so cool. And then we left before Blink started. No, I'm just kidding. We stayed. Dude, during that concert, I don't know if you saw that tour. You probably did. Yeah. But Travis, like, as he was doing his solo, he lowered out of the stage like some Phantom of the Opera shit, and he disappeared, but the drum solo kept going the whole time. And then his drum set and him appeared in the audience and then floated back onto the stage. It was one of the most insane things I've ever seen.
Yeah, the Drum Risers, they did that. I'm not sure that it was that tour, or it may have been Pop Disaster with Green Day, or maybe the reunion tour they did that on. The tour you're referencing is with the big FF word sign.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of fire. Yeah, that was Newfound Glory in Midtown. I think that may have been one of the first concerts I ever went to.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
I, so, I didn't really go to shows in high school. When I was in college, I started going to shows. But yeah, that was a good tour.
It was awesome. And I don't know if I've ever told you this. I kind of got my journalism start. I did not go to school for journalism, but I like to pretend. I worked for a site called Alt Rock Live, where I kind of did the same thing. I would do CD reviews. I would interview band members. And that's kind of how I got my start. My favorite band at the time was Amberlin, the alt rock band. So it made perfect sense to interview them. And I got to interview the lead singer of the band, my favorite band. So again, these opportunities you get when you're in that space, if you're a true music fan in that genre, it's indispensable. So again, you're posting photos of you with Tom DeLonge and all these like iconic people in the punk movement, pop punk movement. It's awesome. And you can feel the love in the book the one that you gave me, the advanced version of, like you said, it's a love letter. And it's a moment in time that a lot of us remember, but a lot of people don't even really talk about. So I think it's awesome that it's coming out now. Like you said, I think it's kind of coming back, the whole movement. So I'm excited, man. But I guess to kind of play off of that, tell us about the photos and the illustrations in the book. They were so cool. Tell us a little about the artist and how that all came about.
Thank you. So the photos, I took them. I dabble. I don't consider myself a photographer, but I took photojournalism 101, and I used to shoot my own shows at the Chronicle. The Associated Press once used one of my photos, kind of blew my mind. So I know how to take a picture, but I don't consider myself a photographer. So I just kind of used some of my old photos that I thought would work well in the book. But the artwork is really, really a rad selling point, in my opinion. And so for years, I wanted to work with this artist. Her name is Cassie Potash, and she does a lot of great T-shirt designs for bands. She does Sum 41. She did Less Than Jake, and she designed Census Fail's logo. So she's worked with a ton more bands. Those are the ones I name off the top of my head because they're kind of like the biggest ones. But I wanted to work for when I wrote a young adult fiction book a few years ago, and I wanted her to do the cover, and it just didn't work out. So when this project became a reality, I was like, she has to do the cover and she has to do the art in the book. And as soon as I linked up with her, like, she was totally down. And yeah, it's awesome because I really think her style of art is so distinct. And I think when people see it, they're going to know. And it really brings together that aesthetic of like a band book and stuff. So yeah, her art's just really cool. It's just she really has her own style.
Yeah,
absolutely. One of the things she did in the book, which was really cool, we came up with her recreating iconic albums in her style. So it's the My Chemical Romance Sweet 3 Cheers cover, but instead of 2 faces, it's like 2 skulls. Or it's like the Weezer the Blue album. It's just Weezer, but they're all skeletons because she's just a really cool skeletal style. So yeah, I thought that was a really fun thing for her to do in the book, rather just, hey, do a skull man with a guitar,
Yeah, it was super cool, man. The American Idiot one too really popped out to me. Again, like, I was a product of this generation and this genre of music. So, anyone who's listening or watching right now who wasn't really a part of it, I totally understand this might be a little alienating, but there's always something I think we can take from certain genres of music. Like you said, rock and roll and rap, and they all come from this sort of cultural thing that has a message that they want to convey out there and get it out there. And there's a reason people like you and I really like this kind of music resonated with us, where maybe it doesn't for someone else. But what do you think it was about pop punk, emo that really made you want to follow that course? That was like your kind of music. You're tatted up. I'm the same way. Like, we're all about the style of this sort of music. And it meant a lot to me, man. And seeing this book brought back so many memories of like what was. So yeah, what is it about this genre, or these genres, I should say, that really stuck with you?
Well, thank you for saying that, because nostalgia is definitely evoking nostalgia is definitely part of the book, but it's also for people who are new to it. It's to kind of, teach them the roots, the roots of where these bands came from and so forth. So it's part nostalgia and it's also part educational. That's why it's like a guide. Right, it's not like a 500-page book. It's more like something you could pick up on the coffee table and learn about the roots of some of these newer bands and so forth. But yeah, the style of music resonated with me. Like, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the underdog element. I don't know. But so I'm originally from New York too. Like, it's another thing we have in common. And then when we moved from New York, we moved to Pennsylvania, a little town, for like maybe a year or half a year. And I didn't know anyone. I was kind of like an outcast there. And I had one friend there the whole time. And we played Dungeons and Dragons together. Like, we were really nerdy. And when I was moving to Texas, he gave me like some CDs. And it was like Get Up Kids, Juliana Theory, like straight up old school emo. And then like Blink, Cheshire Cat. And I listened to him, and something a light bulb kind of went off in my head. And then, a couple of years later, 1997, and this stuff starts coming out more and it starts blowing up. And I'm a product of, 90s music. I love 90s hip hop, 90s alternative rock, and a lot of the punk rock and ska music was becoming popular then too. I mean, I loved, first time I heard like No Doubt and Mighty Mighty Boss Tones and stuff, on the radio. That was huge because you listen to them side by side with like, Pearl Jam and Third Eye Blind and stuff as well. So that was a really good time for me personally, developing when I felt like, I was an outsider, and I heard Blink-182 Dude Ranch for the first time, and that kind of blew my mind. That's still to this day my favorite album of all time. So that really kind of, got me interested in that style of music. And then you learn more about, the cultures and subcultures, what it all means, and as well. So, that kind of carries into the booms of the early 2000s on. It really was, like I said, you can even go back to 1994 too, when Green Day and The Offspring hit it big too. It really didn't stop, but 97, it kind of reignited a little bit. And then 99, it really blew up again. From 99 till about 2000, I mean, depending on who you ask, 2000 right. As well. So yeah, for me, it was always kind of, and in the book, I have, a few theories about why it resonated with so many people at certain times as well. And I think you could really draw parallels now to then. One of the things I talked about was how the youth was feeling disenchanted back then. The Iraq War was like a really contentious point, and the youth really didn't have much to kind of, grasp on. And now, if I'm a youth now, I probably feel similarly. If I'm a young person of color, if I'm a young person who's trans or who's gay, like there's a lot going against you, right? So that style of music is very relatable now to those kids. So I definitely can see why it's making a comeback. If you listen to, if you just turn, you just turn on to this emotive music, or this rage-filled punk music, or this really energetic pop punk music that's maybe singing about sad themes, but it's also upbeat. It's all these things that I kind of see, and I think I attribute to that the comeback too. Is that there's a lot of young people and older people feeling a certain way, especially with stuff that's going on around them. And I think there's no better way to rebel than to listen to this type of music.
That's such a good point, man. And I think it connects us more than it doesn't. Even if like pop punk isn't your thing, or you come from a different generation. I remember NFG did a virtual conference not too long ago, and I was so excited, man. I think they were doing the whole Sticks and Stones album.
Self-titled. They did self-titled.
Yeah. It was self-titled. You're right. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it had hit or miss on it and everything. And I remember being in the chat for that virtual concert.
I was there too. I didn't.
You were doing the viewing party. Yeah. And I remember seeing all the people talking about how old they were and like, oh my God, this brings back so many memories. And what was really cool is like, I was in there. I remember when the self-titled album came out, and then there were people like 10 to 12 to 15 years younger than me being like, this is like my first time hearing it. And that was it for me. Like I felt old going into that virtual conference, but I came out on the other side being like, this music still speaks to people. People still like it and love it and want to hear it, even if they're new to the genre. So I think it was a beautiful kind of communion that shows that, even if it's not your thing anymore or whatnot, like you can all come together somewhere, no matter what generation you come to, and appreciate it. I think this genre of music is underappreciated because it's considered pop punk, and a lot of the OGs kind of look down on it. When something like Green Day went mainstream, or Blink went mainstream. So yeah, what do you think of that whole aspect of all this? I know you touch on it in the book of going from like super old school Green Day, Project Ivy, I believe it was, up to where they Operation Ivy. Thank you. I knew it was some sort of military term. What do you make of stuff like that? These transitions of bands going from like super hardcore or punk to a more pop punk sort of feel.
Well, I think it's like when people get into pop punk, it's like it's a weird, it's your gateway drug into all the other, because punk is just like an umbrella. There's all these little subgenres that hang under it. So it's like, I think for me it was pop punk, and then it was old school punk like Dead Kennedys and like Bad Religion, and then like the California stuff like Bad Religion, Descendants, No Effects, and then it's like emo, and then people go through their hardcore phase, and then you go through your post-hardcore phase, and you go through your indie rock phase, then you go back to pop punk again. It's just like some weird thing. But I think a lot of things you're saying was just really telling about how you're still able to connect to music. It makes you feel old, but it's like the nostalgia element of it. Like every time, like you'll see a band's like, 20-year anniversary of this record, and it's just mind blowing to think, because it feels like just yesterday that I was sitting in my room. So at the time, I was 2000. So like in 2000, I was renting a townhouse. It was me and my roommate from my mom. My mom moved out. We were renting the townhouse from her, paying rent. I was working 40 hours a week at a restaurant while going to community college. And I just remember my free time, I would sit in my room, and right behind me was like all these like posters and band stickers. And I'd be on AOL, and then I have Napster up downloading music. And then I'd be going to shows and concerts. And like, that was like the coolest time. So like, it's cool to kind of revisit that, and it's really telling that, that this music really never went away. This whole time, it's all these bands still existed. They all toured, they all put out records. The boom just kind of died a little bit, in terms of, but you could argue in general that a lot of rock music kind of died a little bit in the mainstream for a while too. So it's just interesting to me that it's kind of making a comeback now in the weirdest ways, through hip hop and pop stars. And I was listening to the Olivia Rodrigo album the other day, and there's like a song on there that sounds like Paramore. And I was like, whoa, this is like a pop punk song. And the first song sounds like kind of like a 90s alternative rock. So it's pretty cool that seeing like pop artists and hip hop artists kind of, I don't know. I mean, there's this party that's also like, the gatekeepers saying, who are you to make this music? But it's like, hey, if kids listen to Machine Gun Kelly and then go back and retroactively listen to Newfound Glory or, Screeching Weasel or Descendants or, Sum 41 or Good Charlotte, whatever, cool. So be it.
Yeah, that's such a good point too. And I'm glad you brought up Machine Gun Kelly, because I remember when he was working with, was it Travis Barker?
Travis produced his record.
Okay. And they had that cool Alien song that they did. And it was like a super progressive drum beat throughout the whole thing, which really brought me back to like the early punk days. Yeah. And someone like Machine Gun Kelly, I was the same way when he first came out with like all those sort of punk or pop punk songs. I'm like, who is this idiot? I thought he was like a hip hop artist. But you're right. You got to step back and be like, let them like explore these things, because then they'll gain an appreciation for it. And I really respected something Machine Gun Kelly said, even though I don't listen to his music really. I respect something he said in an interview, maybe with Rolling Stone, where he said, I want to constantly challenge myself and my listeners so that, maybe I do have a rap album, maybe I do have a pop punk album. And that's what we should be doing. Like, it should be a constant evolution, because if I'm just putting out the same style every time, what's the point? So I think he made some really good points in that as well, that like you can, as a musician or an artist, grow and change. And if those people who truly respect your work support you, they'll go along for the ride. So I think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot more genre blending in mainstream music in general nowadays. I mean, look at Post Malone. Right from the start, they were like, is he rap enough? What is he doing playing guitar? He's singing too much. Like, is he not hip hop? But like right from the start, there's a lot in the mainstream. You see a lot of genre blending, and even in like punk rock stuff, it's, you go back to the Clash and the Damned, and they were genre blend. They were one of the first punk rock bands to define the sound, and were genre blending. The Clash had reggae themes. They had slower songs. The Damned had like slower pianos and as well. Then you had bands like Fugazi, who just totally took the scene and kind of turned it on its head, and as well. So it's really cool to even look back to say, hey, some of these like OG punk rock bands were genre blending then too. So it's interesting. And I think a lot of fans can tell who's being authentic about it and who's not, as well. So I think, I think that's it's up to people to decide, who's really in it for the music and
who's in it for that. I get it, brother. Yeah. And Post Malone, I'm so glad you brought it up. We got him in our world now, visiting Skinwalker Ranch. The dude's seen UFOs, so maybe he'll have his own UFO show coming out soon. We'll see.
Well, hey, Demi Lovato has one, so Demi Lovato stealing food right out of our mouths.
And I was one of those people who complained when I first heard about it, and I've since tempered that because, again, I think it's really important for celebrities to help these subjects get out there. There's a lot of pros and cons on either end. Where do you land on that whole thing? Are you excited for this Demi Lovato show, or what do you think is going to happen?
I mean, I get it. I get what you're saying too, because I feel the same way. It's definitely a double-edged sword, because it's like I was complaining about it, and some of my friends were kind of like picking at me on it. It's like, dude, you don't understand. Like, myself and others, have interviewed for these shows, and we've been told, oh yeah, you're the one, and then the shows never happen. The next thing you know, the show comes out with the guy from with what's his face, the guy from who plays Spock in Star Trek, starring in it. Like,
Right.
They don't need the money, and great, yes, they may bring more exposure, but they can do that other ways. Demi Lovato just tweeting about UFOs is going to bring, is going to bring new eyes to the subject. So there is, there's the old gatekeeper part, where you're like, they shouldn't be doing this, but then you get it too. Oh yeah, they're going to bring new eyes, but I don't just think about myself, but I think about other people who've interviewed for these shows too. Like you're someone your industry was hit heavily this past year, heavily, and I can't imagine having to try to make ends meet during all that, and you're potentially up for a show and you lose out to that show that could potentially be life changing to a millionaire. Like that's where I kind of like get defensive about that type of stuff, but. And it's not like, Demi Lovato, or they're not doing it on purpose. They have no idea probably that, that there's better quality researchers to do their show. But you look at it on the production side, they say, oh, well, this may get a lot of ratings because it's, William Shatner and Demi Lovato or Zachary Quinto, that's his name.
Yeah.
So, there's definitely a few sides to it. I get it. But, I think we can't feel at least a little spite at it, especially when it's like, I could really use that money.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. And I said on the show point blank, like, I know that you and I were up for things like the Zachary Quinto show, or I know for a fact I was up for the Demi Lovato project. So it's that bitter side of us. But again, I think you're so right. And I actually spoke to one of the people that Demi Lovato interviewed for her upcoming show, and they told me she's no joke, man. Like, holy crap, she knows what she's doing and she knows the history. So that's, again, it's even going back to the Tom DeLonge days when people are like, he's a rock star, stay in your lane. But then you listen to him talk about UFOs, not on Joe Rogan. Let's forget that ever happened. You hear him talk about UFOs and you're like, whoa, like he's pulling out stuff like these deep cuts from books that like you never would have expected he would read. So yeah, I have hope. I know she'll do a good job with it. I hope she does a good job with it. But let's circle back to the book. I know it finds its way back to UFOs, but what is some of your favorite interviews that you did for the book? Again, this isn't just like your thoughts on the genre. You were out there interviewing these people as they were living it and as you were living it too. So yeah, what interviews really stuck out to you?
So in the back of my head, some of the later interviews I did, I was planning to do a book eventually. This was kind of towards when I was like, I'm eventually going to do a book. So some of the interviews, because usually when you interview a band, your questions are geared towards a certain angle of the story. Sometimes it's okay to break out, ask a fanboy his question or whatever. But so for me, I was like, I'm going to do this book someday. So I want to ask some questions about that time period. So one of the two experiences that really stood out, I covered the last X Games in Austin. This was probably, years ago this was, but I think was I still at the Chronicle at the time? I think I was still working there, but no, I wasn't. I think I still had my music blog for them. And X Games was being headlined by Blink. And if everyone knows X Games, action sports and punk rock have always kind of gone hand in hand. And so Blink was headlining it. So for me, this was like perfect to cover it. I was able to get coverage because I covered X Games before for the Chronicle, for my blog on them, or for their website, just for chron.com. I covered it when Kanye West headlined one year. So so Blink was headlining it, and I basically found out like the day before that I got approved to interview them at the show. And I've interviewed Blink before. I've interviewed Tom in person, Tom and Mark over the phone, Travis over the phone, but never Mark, Matt, and Travis at the same time. So that was pretty cool. And I think that day it was just myself and Disney were the only people who really interviewed them. So that was really rad that I got to sit on the couch with them and interview them. And one of the quotes I got from Mark, a couple questions I asked was kind of about growing up in that scene. And I think it was a really good quote about that's when all those bands kind of coalesced and all of them found their footing was during that time and how they have great memories from that time period. So that was a really cool to pull excerpts from that interview to put in the book. And then also there's a part in the back of the book where I got to shadow a friend of mine who's the Descendants tour manager. And I got to interview all the Descendants basically about, not just about pop punk, because I interviewed Milo, and he said he has great quotes in the book about the evolution of pop punk and punk rock in general. And he's one of those older bands, and he never saw it as who are these newer bands? He always thought that Descendants were the evolution of Buzzcocks and Ramones, and Green Day and Blink were the evolution of the Descendants. So I thought that was a really cool quote to have in there as well, as to have Milo Aukerman, who's a legend in punk rock, to basically give the approval of the evolution of the genre. But just that experience, kind of hanging out with the Descendants for a day, was really cool, because I met their tour manager, Jeff, when I interviewed Milo of the Descendants at a festival outside of Austin. And when I showed up for the interview, you usually communicate through the tour manager. And I noticed the tour manager's cell phone was a Houston area code. And I'm like, hey, are you from Houston? And he was. And long story short, we ended up going to the same high school together, different years, growing up in the same part of town. And we just became friends. So to this day, he's a good friend of mine. But I remember saying, hey, you think it'd be cool if I did a day in the life? He's like, yeah, absolutely. So I did a day in the life for the Chronicle, and I included that in the book. So I thought it was a really cool thing to see what a tour manager's day in the life is. So that was a really fun thing to include as well.
That's so cool. Yeah, and I think tour managers are highly underrated and underappreciated. It is a thankless job. It's like the same on Broadway. We have stage managers, and people don't really know what these people do, but they are literally the god of a Broadway play. So when you go to see the show, you think it all just happens and boom, show over. But you got this one person, maybe two, and they are literally calling every single light cue that you see, which can be in the thousands for a production, every sound cue, every entrance of an actor. They're on headsets making sure that actor is in the costume they need to run out on stage and do this. And meanwhile, they're doing 1,000 other things as well. So someone like a tour manager, I can't even imagine what a day in the life would look like. And I'm sure it changes on a day-to-day basis too, especially in the pop punk or punk scene. I'm sure he was dealing with some crazy stuff for sure.
Well, yeah, because he went from, he used to be tour manager Phoenix TX. So you have a bunch of young kids who are, touring with MXPX and Blink all around the world. And now Descendants who are all obviously older. So it's a different type of babysitting. It's he has to wake them up, get them coffee, rather as opposed to if it's a younger band, hey, don't drink too much, so it's it's definitely a different thing. But it's just really cool to see all the different hats that tour manager wears. And like you said, a stage manager, there's so much responsibility when you go to a concert or a play, or so much stuff that goes on behind the scenes that a lot of people don't realize. It's not just fun and games. It's legit work.
Yeah. There's so much goes into every concert. Again, it's not the band just showing up, plugging in their guitar to the amp and playing. It's interesting. Well, I got two last questions for you, Mike, if you have time.
Yeah.
Cool. The first one is we kind of talked about this celebrity wise or television wise, but the idea, and you cover this is kind of the reason for punk rock and UFOs. You have a niche community that is punk. You have a niche community that is the UFO community, and moving to the mainstream, which is what pop punk eventually became. And now we're feeling that in the UFO world. We are now going mainstream now more than ever. And, we talked about getting drowned out by celebrities when it comes to television and stuff, but overall, when it comes to the information getting out to the public, 60 Minutes, The New Yorker, all these incredible things that have come out recently. What do you make of UFOs finally? And we've said this in the past, UFOs are going mainstream, but now we can actually visualize it and live in it. What do you think about UFOs going mainstream? Is this good? Is this bad? Should we be worried? Or what are your thoughts on that?
It's funny. I think I said this, I've kind of been on your show so many times. I think I said this every time, that we are living in the golden age of UFOs. Mm-hmm. And it's just crazy to me that, the 60 Minutes piece where there was something new in there, a new person came forward, but just having that, not rehashed, but just having that story retold on that platform is huge. Absolutely huge, the 60 Minutes thing. And then the New Yorker piece, once again, nothing new in there, groundbreaking, but God, it covers everything. I was on, what's his face's show recently. What was it? A few weeks ago, I was on Sean Rash, Witness Citizen show. And one of the questions he asked me was, if anyone is new to UFOs, which book would you direct them to? And I said, I would just direct them to the New Yorker article first, because it is like a book. It really does catch you up to speed with most of the mainstream UFO cases, the past 100 years or so. So yeah, I think that's just huge, and it's a good thing. And there's a lot of older researchers I see every day just kind of crap on everything, and it's just it's not even worth it arguing with them, because it's like they're really looking like they're being left behind, and they're kind of sour about it. And it's like, how can you not look at everything that's like, do you want this to happen or not? And like I said, I don't want to name names, but like I see it every day, and I just kind of cringe at it, because it's just like, dude, like what do you want at this point? Like nothing is good enough. Like, do you want this to happen? And so yeah, I think UFOs going to mainstream is great. I mean, I think it helps us for sure. UFO research, it helps our book sales, hopefully.
Yeah, that's a good point. My downloads and my Twitter followers have definitely gone up since all this stuff's happened. So we have to thank the Alex Dietrich for that, the Navy pilot.
Yeah, but just in general, I mean, I think it's, ultimately when everyone, there's some quote, I think when everyone's successful, everyone eats, or something kind of like that. And I think it kind of definitely will trickle down, to, just if Washington Post links to one of our websites, like Danny Silva's blog has been linked, in like Daily Mail linked to one of his stories. So, I mean, that's big, it's big for smaller, sites and stuff, and non-mainstream sites to have that. So I think, if that brings more eyes to us and more eyes to the phenomenon in general, I think that's great. And it's, I think it's great because then people know, hey, I know this person's in UFOs, talk to him. And, then we start getting sources come to us now and stuff. So I think it's only beneficial in the long run.
You're right. And also some of these mainstream outlets are coming to us for information, something like Gotti Schwartz over at NBC, or Stephen Greenstreet at New York Post. Like, these are guys who are like not only coming to us to find out what's going on in the UFO world, but like actually helping us and linking to things and being like, go check out this person's work. So I think that's pretty cool too, when these mainstream outlets do that.
And they don't have to do that. Like you said, a lot of them are not even familiar with us. They're just doing basically their story based upon the sources they have, and then maybe they'll look up a Skeptics interview, and they'll find Mick West or whoever and so forth. But or some of them are just digging more to say, hey, who else has a good perspective? And they may look up top UFO podcast, and yours comes up, and what I mean. So like I think some of them are really doing their digging, because they are seeing this kind of beyond just being a movement, being a legit story. Yeah.
Well, all right. Adding one more question, Mike. I'm sorry, brother. You said Mick West. This dude was just on CNN debunking some of the current UFO stuff. What do you make of the guy? I know this is a heated topic. He might even be watching or listening to this, so keep that in mind with your answer. No, I'm just kidding. Right. Be honest. What do you think of people like Mick West who are, it seems like they're out to kind of spoil all of our fun, when in reality, they might be doing us a good service at times as well. So, yeah, what do you make of people like Mick West?
Well, first I have to give him mad props working on Tony Hawk Pro Skater.
Hell yeah.
I did not know he did that until I read the New Yorker article. And I was like, oh, man, like, mad respect, because that video game was that the soundtrack to that video game was a gateway drug for a lot of kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
Punk and all that stuff. So big ups to Mick West for doing the Tony Hawk game. It's also one of the greatest video games ever. But yeah, I mean, you make a good point. Skepticism is needed, and we may circle back eventually and say, wow, that was kind of needed. But some of it's just exhausting, where it's just like, and good on him that he gets these mainstream people reaching out to him as a skeptic, because some of the arguments, in my opinion, are just kind of roll my eyes at, the whole seagull thing, and just but it's whatever. I mean, I'll rephrase this. I think there's worse arguments and worse people to interview for the Mick West in terms of skeptics. I think it's weird. Like, no one really attacks him that much, even though some of the things he's saying we kind of roll our eyes at, because I think he does have some credibility from his past. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
He's very polite too, which I think has a lot. He has that going for him too. He's not like, you're an idiot, this is what happened. He's very meticulous. And yeah, I agree. While I don't agree with all of his assessments or analyzation of things, we need these people. Mm-hmm. We definitely need skeptics in our field. Debunkers is another story. When they're not willing to look at the facts and the data, which I don't think Mick has done on some of the stuff he's covered. He's not one to listen or trust pilots or witnesses of these events, which is frustrating but understandable too. Like, witness testimony is witness testimony. You can't prove it or anything like that. But I think it's good to he keeps us on our toes, which I think is important. We're not just, we believe Tic Tac was alien. Like, no, let's look at all the other answers first. So, yeah.
Like you said, it's hard to jump down someone's throat when they're polite about it. I could scoff at his opinions, but I'm not going to attack him. Because you said, he was polite. I think there's worse people that has this intellectual arrogance, like Neil deGrasse Tyson. It's just like, dude, like, get on the train and move on. It's like you're almost hurting your credibility at this point by just not paying attention to the facts at what's there. So
that is such a good point. I feel the same way about people like Neil as well. It's like, you haven't even looked at any of this, dude. You're just saying what you say for every UFO. All right, last question for you, Mike. In terms of where pop punk and emo lays today, I know we have the bands of the past that we can always have that nostalgia with, but you do have a guide and whatnot in the book as well of what people should check out and listen to. So who should we be looking out for in 2021 when it comes to kind of the pop punk movement or emo or alt rock? Yeah. Any bands you really want to turn us towards in terms of that?
That's tough because my music taste is old man yells at clouds. That's and my friends kind of give me that too. But no, I mean, there's a lot of really good rad bands that are kind of throwbacks to that era. Some of the bands mentioned in the book, Front Bottoms are really good. Sincere Engineer, Hot Mulligan, Touche Amore, which is this really amazing hardcore band that makes hardcore music sound beautiful, if that makes any sense. So there's a lot of really good bands that have been kind of around for years that aren't necessarily brand new, but are the standard bearers of that genre. Like if the Warped Tour still existed now, they would be like the Newfound Glories and the Yellow Cards and the Rancids of old. They would be kind of in that position now if the Warped Tour still existed. So yeah, a lot of those types of bands I think are doing a really good job. And then there's new bands I hear every day. There's a band called Talk Show Host out of Canada, really good. And then who else? I was gonna name one specifically, but I'm drawing blanks. But like Willow Smith just did a pop punk song. Like it's crazy. Like
interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice, man. Well, again, things to look forward to and to grow to love, just like we did of the bands of the past. So I love music. It's a constant evolution, just like everything else in the art world. And the same goes for UFOs, an evolution in that as well. So real last question, Mike, before we go, where can we find the book and where can we find everything else you're up to, brother?
Everything, go to punkrockandufos.com. The books, Stranger Than Fiction, Punk Rock UFO Stranger Than Fiction, as well as my new book, A Guide to the Emo Pop Punk Rise. You get on Amazon, Barnes & Noble as well. So yeah, the book's currently up for pre-order. It'll be out June 10th officially. So if you pre-order it, you should be getting it now. But pre-order now, the pre-order numbers are looking great, and that's encouraging. So thank you for everyone who pre-ordered it. Thank you everyone who listened to me on previous episodes and who bought Stranger Than Fiction as well, who supported Ryan's book, Somewhere in the Skies. Ryan and I are label mates, both under Beyond the Fray Publishing, and which they're doing a great job. I always kind of want to give them props. Like just Shannon is just always learning and evolving how to do new things to promote her artists. I'm still thinking music, her writers, and just,
hey, we're artists as well.
just her doing, like the other day, I sent some audio clips over to her, and she made these really cool promotional videos. And my book's a year old at this point. They're still doing like cool little things like that to promote it. I think that's really cool. It makes us all part of the same, goal.
Absolutely, man. My special thanks goes out to both of our people over there at Beyond the Fray, G, Michael, and Shannon. They're incredible. And you're right. They really care about what they're doing. So I know neither of us are done working with Beyond the Fray. There's so much still to come. And brother, it's always so good to catch up with you. It's been a long time coming. I want to congratulate you once again on becoming a father. Please give your wife my best as well. And as always, thank you for joining me on Somewhere in the Skies.
Thank you again, Ryan. Once again, it's always been a pleasure. And I will end this with every conversation we always have. I'm still waiting for someday for you to do the UFO Broadway play. It's got to happen. I'm telling you, no one is better suited to do it than you. And I want it, even if it's just like The Crucible, like it's just a book that's written in play, do it, please. I'm telling you.
It's coming, guys. Broadway is reopening in September. Be on the lookout for Rendlesham the Musical coming soon.